Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I'm Will Schick, Director of Product Development for Atomic Mass Games, coming back after a July 4th break. I don't know. I was going to say extravaganza. That doesn't make any sense. We were off last week, so thank you for joining us again this week. We've got a lot of cool hobby action coming at you this week. Next week, though, be sure to tune in. We're going to be having the game streams going on, and we're going to be playing Star Wars Legion, because I'm just going to give it away. I don't care, and you can't stop me. We're going to be playing Star Wars Legion on Tuesday, and we're going to be playing some Marvel Crisis Protocol on Wednesday. So be sure to check out those streams. It's going to be fun. In the meantime, today we are going to be painting one Savage Opress from the Witches of Dathomir squad pack. That's the word.
You act like I was going to stop you when I was the one who was like, maybe we should say it.
Yeah, but you didn't sound very convinced, and then I just did it, so you never know, right? Like,
That just shows
you could have just been like, I was just talking out of school. I can't believe you did that. And I'd be like, well, it's done.
Listen, whoever talks first sets the narrative.
Is that how it works?
That's what we know.
Oh, all right. All right, I'm into this. There's some medium over here. I'm going to take this medium. So for those who unaware, Savage Opress is styling black with more black and then some extra black. So we're going to paint a lot of black today. And we're going to try to do a couple different tones of black. So my first black, which is going to be for like the cloak and kind of the undersuit and everything, is going to be a blue black. We're going to make a brown black, because looking at a lot of the reference images of this bad Mamma Jamma, his upper armor is kind of more like a really dark brown leather. So we're going to kick that more to the brown side, like this. And that'll take care of most of our blacks. And then all we have to worry about is his skin tone. So I've got my warm yellow down here, which we're kind of going to work with. We got our white to be able to pick things up. I've got a couple other paints as well we might experiment with. His armor is just going to be true metallic, so we're going to do it that way. It'll be fantastic. It'll be fun. We're going to have a good time. And with that, I'm going to look at my reference photo one last time really quick. Great. I'm happy. Loving it. I'm going to do, you know what? We're going to get all the black in here. We're going to do a little bit of a gray black as well. Yeah, that's right. I said it. Gray black. We got three different black colors going on. And we're going to use that for some of like the designs and stuff like down here and everything. All right. With that said, let's go ahead and get started off with our black here. I want...
Which black is it?
Which black? This is the blue black. So the blue black's going to be for this little cloak here. Speed paint medium is a little weird, but we'll work around it. It wants to really make that stuff stretch more than I want it to right now. So we're going to start with the blue black because for the most part, like the majority of Savage's clothes are pretty much in that blue black range. The brown black we're going to use up here on his little like striated armor kind of thing, his upper torso. Might wind up using that for the boots as well. Alternatively, we could use it for the pants down here, which could work compositionally because we'd have brown, black, brown, black. So some nice layers for the eyes to kind of follow. Ways to break up our colors to make them feel different. And that's really the biggest thing with these kind of tonal blacks, is that you could do them all one shade of black, but having those different chromatic blacks in there will give the eye something to read, even if you are really, really light on your chromatic blacks. Like, they don't have to go all the way to blue or anything like that. You can be pretty close. Like even here, right now, this blue black is really, really close to just straight black. But as we start mixing in those different colors, we're going to get different cool and warm colors and all that stuff. And it's going to help the eye find this little piece, this little artistic endeavor to be far more compositionally exciting. You know what? I'm just going to do this because I don't care. because we can always just paint over our black and build up our colors. It'll be great. All right. With that layer down, we get these sleeves here. Whoop. Kind of knocking those. Come back over here. Come back over here. Too careful at this stage because my metals will go over the black just fine. So we can do it that way. Come out. That'll be fine. All right. And then we'll just go ahead and do the boots in the same black. Because I like that plan. We'll just kind of like break everything up. Really, really easy. Or kind of 3 different zones. It's true. He's not on a normal base. I didn't have the right base, so I just kind of like quickly slapped him on this one. Sometimes I just dig into the giant pile of extra bases because I am one of those people who likes to paint the base separate from the mini, and then when the mini is done, I take the mini off the painting base and I stick it on a real base. And one of the reasons that I like to do it that way is because for me, like having to go back and paint a base after finishing the miniature is just weird. It kind of breaks my flow and enjoyment of the whole hobby process. I want the mini to just be the mini, and the base is kind of a different hobby project. So I'll batch paint a whole ton of bases if I can. And then that way I can just come in and do the bases once. And then over the course of time, as I paint the miniatures, I just knock them out as I want to. And I don't have to worry about it. So it's very satisfying for me because I can just focus on painting the miniature, and then once the miniature is done, I snap the miniature off the temp base, which of course is this one here, and then I glue them to the already painted and beautiful base, and my miniature is complete in record time. And for my workflow and the way that I just enjoy the hobby, that for me is like the best of all the options, all the worlds. It makes me very, very satisfied. And it makes me dislike working on bases less because I don't find basing to be that fun. It's like eating your vegetables. You got to do it for sure, and it's important. But it's that part of the meal that's like, ugh, I just have to do it. But see, I love it when veggies are just the whole meal. Like when you get a really great like veggie-centric meal, some delicious vegetarian sweet potato tacos or something, like I'm all in because it's the whole meal. Like I can just sit and enjoy it for what it is, not have to like break apart the thing that I like while I try to do the other thing that I want to do. And that's just the way I approach it. Some people really like, doing everything all at once when it comes to basing and everything else. Just get in there. We're just going to moosh paint in there. No one's really going to see it. But we need it to be dark. There. All right. Shablow! And then I'm going to use the same color on the pants. Yeah, and I mean, that just comes down to like personal preference too, right? So the chat's talking about how sometimes it's great to paint the mini on the base because you can use the base painting as a chance to do some weathering and get the dirt in there on the mini and everything. And that is true. Getting that integration of the dust and the dirt can roll right along with it. With the Shatterpoint bases and, you know, most of our stuff, the exception of Legion, which is more of a kind of do-yourself, since I always use the pre-sculpted basing, you know, those are pretty clean. There could be a little grit and grime, but if I wanted to add that, I can just naturally add it, and I don't really have to worry about it like integrating into the overall composition. But it is a good point. Okay, we're gonna leave that alone. That's gonna be metal. That's gonna be that. Just gonna really quickly go over. I don't know if I'm gonna make that boot top silver or not, so we're just gonna do this really quick. We'll see what we have time for. Time. Okay, that's our first layer down. Let's grab a lot more blue. And for those who are wondering what I'm mixing, this is phthalo blue with the red shade. So often in some art lines, especially the Chimera colors that I'm using primarily right now, there are phthalo blues that have red shade, or there's phthalo blues with green shade. I'm using phthalo blue with the red shade. And the primary reason I'm doing that is because it'll work well with this warm red brown that I'm using for my brown black. So there's red here, there's red here, there's red here. There's yellow, which, you know, right there with the red, all warm colors, not a lot of cool colors. We're doing the hot anger today, the burning fury. So that's just kind of the overall temperature that we're going for here. And I'm just gonna kind of quickly knock in this blue. And you'll see that I'm just going to be pretty heavy-handed with it. So even though I did that original base coat of black, I'm going to do most of the area again with this blue. And the reason that I'm doing that is because the black is obviously really strong. And I want more of that chromatic black to kind of like read through on his clothing. And the paint is not completely opaque. So even though we're kind of like slathering it on pretty heavy here, the undercoat, which is that darker black, is going to have a lot of impact over our final color look, because no paints are really pure opaque. They all have some translucency to them. And these colors especially have a decent amount of translucency to them. So I know that that undercoat is going to matter a lot, and I'm going to be able to play with that more if I want to, which I do. And that's why I wanted to start with a really dark base, but then I wanted to build up my kind of to my mid-tone right away with this. So we're just kind of moving a little bit back and forth with how we've learned the paints that we're using behave and the overall kind of final effect that we want. And that is why we're doing it this way. So you could easily do it differently and skip some steps and go faster or slower. We could have started with our midtone, but if we'd put this blue, this far more blue black over our gray Zenith Prime, it'll look like that. So you can see how radically different it is depending on the undercoat because of the translucency. So had I started with this color, which I'm kind of considering my mid-tone, our color would have been this. Not impossible to get back to black. We can definitely like push that color back down and make it deeper, but it would have changed our approach and would have affected kind of the overall look of the colors. But I want this Sauvage to be pretty darn dark. We really want to lean into the fact that, you know, he's a pseudo-Sith apprentice and he's full of dark rage and the dark side and all that stuff. So I want these colors to be really, really deep. And to do that, it's better for me to start with kind of a new undercoat that is darker and build up from there. So, the cool thing about paints in general and acrylics and all that is that they have so many properties and different ways to manipulate them as a medium. And there's a lot of smart people out there who know a heck of a lot about how to get the most out of those paints. And you can kind of learn these techniques like glazing and washing and even base coating and layering. And you can come up with some really cool stuff. His tattoos are sculpted on his face. I mean, we'll do a wash probably to do the face really quick, and that'll hopefully kind of show how the details are in there. But yeah, they're all sculpted in. We try as much as possible with important critical like details like that to put them into sculpt. There are times where that doesn't work, whether it's because of where the tattoos or the stuff that has to be marked out is. Asajj is a great example of that. Like where most of her tattoos are, they would have been where the mold would have wanted to cast, which means that you either have to cast the head a different way or you have to do more parts for the head and all that. And we just decided that those were kind of simple enough and easy enough that we'd leave them for players and painters to be able to kind of like mimic themselves. And even with Savaj's stuff, or if you look at the Mother Talzin we did last week, she has the major details sculpted in, but some of the minor details that just simply wouldn't read well or that would very strongly distort the face of the mini and start to make the miniature just look weird, we left off. She has a couple of like dark lines kind of around her lips and stuff and everything that, there's minimum tolerances that you can do on a sculpt, and there are things that you have to like consider when it comes to what manufacturing methods and the material you're working with and everything can account for. And sometimes that does impact whether or not we put facial details on, because we're working with well-known characters, and we have to be very cognizant of like honoring the look that Lucasfilm has set forth for these characters. There are times where it's not within our ability to like cheat the details or change them for the sake of production, at which point we have to make the choice of, are we leaving this up to the player to do because we can't accomplish it effectively within the means that we have within this stuff. And it happens. And then at that point, it's like, okay, well, now it's up to the players to kind of, if they want that detail in, if they feel really strongly about having Asajj's accurate tattoos, it's up to you to art that part in and to make it work within whatever ability you have to do that. Or leave them off, and that's okay too. Because it's your choice, There's many things in the game that are left to player choice and decisions, and that's perfectly fine. But we as, the stewards of the license, as the creators of the game, every choice we make needs to reflect the care and accuracy that LFL requires of us and asks of us, and that's only fair. That's what makes it a partnership, and we have discussions about that stuff, and we come to compromises from time to time. Is this detail critically important, or can we do this so that we can make it easier for players to paint and hobby it? And sometimes the answer is absolutely, this is not critical. You can do it this way to make it better for the medium. And sometimes the answer is, no, this is 100% is like core to the character and their look, and if you can't do it, then you have to leave it up to the player to choose to take the effort to put it on. That's just how it works. Yeah, posing, looking at things in Tableau, as I like to say, around the office, which people always give me a hard time for, but posing in general and like thinking about characters and how they interact with each other is something that we really try to do where we can and where it makes sense. So well, who knows what the future may hold? You know, there's a good likelihood that if we were to do a character that we wanted to interact with them in a way, you know, we would come back and look at these characters and be like, okay, how do Maul and Savage look like stacked up against Sidious, and are we trying to recreate that moment? There's also the likelihood that, you know, depending on how we feel about the characters and the moment we're trying to like relive, maybe it just makes more sense to come in and do whole new versions, do a dual pack, do those kinds of things. And that's, you know, one of the really great strengths of having those different properties.
There should be a photo. I know, it's me. Hello.
What?
Hi.
A
I'm the
photo?
problem. It's me.
First of all, you can't prove it was me. Digital fakery happens. And no, I was never there.
That came out of Adepticon about some future Shatterpoint things that showed, as an example, how certain
can we just say Luke and Vader? Isn't that okay?
I mean, it is. It is.
Because that was the picture. I mean, we showed it.
That's the picture.
Yeah. I'm more dancing around the fact that I don't want to get off this stream and then go online and suddenly have everything blown up because he's like, Sidious confirmed. Like, no, we never said that. We never said that.
But yeah, if you guys want to see how that thought process is reflected in a
but yeah, like the Luke and Vader, they were sculpted and conceived of at the same time, and we knew we really wanted to make those two kind of their own mini diorama, you know, their own little like shelf display without necessarily having a display. Sometimes it works that way too, and it just makes sense. But there's danger in that too. If you make poses or you choose posing based on the fact that it looks really badass, when these two characters are right next to each other, but the vast majority of the time those two characters aren't going to be anywhere near each other, right? You can wind up with really weak or bad poses for the game in order to hit like something that's here. And again, this goes back to, okay, well, but if we make a cool hobby-centric product, like a dual pack, we have a lot more freedom and flexibility to tell a story that is, you know, core to the product itself. And we build around that. And then we can make sure that the poses are both cool on the display, off the display, all of that stuff. So that level of freedom of artistic expression becomes really important to be able to capture these moments that I think speak to all of us in really powerful ways. And that's, it's cool. It's fun to do. It's fun to explore that.
Schick, did you by any chance see how people are playing around with building terrain that fits the you cannot run terrain into it?
I've seen a lot of people currently, which always blows my mind because that pack just came out over the weekend. I've seen a lot of people just take the idea and the concept and run with it in some really awesome ways. I don't think I've seen a complete table integration yet, but I've seen a lot of different stuff. And that's why, to talk philosophically, that's the whole purpose of those products. It's why we put investment into them. It's why we make them in a way that hopefully is more accessible to players and people and hobbyists alike, is because I think they're supposed to be aspirational and they're supposed to, inspire folks to want to really explore the art of the hobby and what can be done, and to make them think outside the box, When you paint your Savage or you paint your Mace Windu or whatever, you're mostly thinking of it like, okay, I want it to fit my paint scheme maybe, or maybe I have this cool idea for this character and that's what I'm going to do for the squad or whatever. You're making important choices, but you're not necessarily thinking about it in terms of just its artistic value and what's there, and viewing, the game, because it is a game, but it's also a hobby. It's also art. It's your art. there's more than just one way to approach a game like Star Wars Shatterpoint, and celebrating all of that and providing players an opportunity and a way to maybe promote those different aspects is really important to us internally, and I think it's important to the hobby because I think we all mostly start by being inspired by looking at these bomb-ass miniatures on a cool three-dimensional battlefield and saying, my gosh, that looks so amazing, I want to play that. What is this thing? That's what got me into it 32 years ago. It was a catalog of all things because I'm that old. Literally a paper catalog filled with products, little miniatures products. And I was like, look at this thing. And I was like, my gosh, I must buy all of these things because they're so cool. And then, I was like, okay, but what are they about? Well, there's a game that goes with them. Oh, that's amazing. And that was it, But without the visual pull, then what are we doing? There's lots of great game products out there. So what sets miniatures apart? And there's the lifestyle, the living nature of the games, but I think more than anything, it's the fact that there's a lot more than just the game to get involved with, to build your skills at. Yeah, you can get better and better at the game and become an awesome commander or general or whatever. But the fact that you also get to build artistic skills, that you get to realize your vision for your force, it truly becomes something that is yours. Pretty awesome. Well,
there's so much inspiration in the community groups as well, of just people, either taking their time with it or really challenging themselves with regularity as new things come out and as they work through the queue. And so that I often think about how long each of these things sits in our hands before they even hit the table for a game. Because even just working my own path on my own way through the Shatterpoint core set, I mean, I've been at that for weeks and just kind of taken my time with it. But I'm so excited for that magical moment where then I get to share it in the gameplay. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of ways to enjoy it and get inspiration from other folks in that group.
I mean, I'm always inspired purely by somebody who's like, these aren't the best painted that I've ever seen on here. I'm no award winner, but I finished them and I love them. And I'm like, yes, now I want to go paint my stuff too, because you don't have to be the best at it. You just have to, love what you do. And if you're happy with what you've done because you did it and no one else can do it that way, it's fantastic. I'm sure there are dual packs for non-Saber heroes planned. Well, we don't talk about future releases, but there are definitely a lot more Star Wars characters that don't use sabers than do. And I think that there's an entire breadth of very, very cool duels, quote unquote duels, that I would love to be able to explore, and I'm sure Dallas would love to be able to explore, the whole team would love to be able to explore. And hopefully we'll get the opportunity. Because Star Wars is more than just Jedi and Sith, although I think, they're definitely a fundamental pillar. They're a foundation of the house. Very important. But no, it's always so fun to hop on a release weekend or whatever and see what the community is doing with everything, to see the ideas people had and the inspiration that they're going with. It's pretty neat. And I find it to be inspiring as well, because I just want to get out there and do stuff, or somebody does something really neat and then I kind of shake my fist because I've already painted that thing, but now I want to go back and try a different thing. Building on each other's ideas and kind of just pushing each other forward. It's very cool about the community. Burr, burr, burr. We're just going to make your belt gray, and then we'll come back and figure it out later.
One of the things that always inspires me the most is just watching the consistency of how often people are painting and sharing, because you do start to see a pattern of individuals sharing their squads as they come together. And that always makes me think about like breaking things down, that it's not always that I have to have an entire afternoon to paint. I could paint for an hour every day and just chip away and make progress. And sometimes that's what you need to make it seem surmountable when you've got such a mountain of opportunity.
Yeah, like Stephen King had a quote once that I've always really liked, and basically they were like, well, somebody was asking, they're like, well, how did you become such a great writer? And he's like, look, if you decided to just lift weights, to just do bicep curls 15 minutes a day, every day, just 15 minutes. He's like, by the end of the year, imagine how much stronger that, like, you would be. Like, you would be a different person. And every skill is like that. It doesn't matter necessarily how much time, it's consistency. It's just putting in the reps. So it's better to have 15 minutes of painting than zero painting at all if your goal is to improve. And that's, it's a big reason as to why whenever somebody talks about, or asks like, what's the best color for a miniature? It's like, the best color is done, because it means that you did it and you learned some skills along the way. And your next one will be better whether you mean to or not. Like, a lot of folks don't set out to be great miniatures painters. I think, everyone wants to do well. Most people want to do well, for sure. But in the end, like in the final analysis of everything, you just get better naturally the more you do it. And at some point you get to look back at all the stuff that you did and you go, man, I'm getting pretty good. I bet I could do this, or I bet I could do that. And sometimes you push yourself, At some point along the journey, you're like, I used to only be able to lift this weight 10 times before I got exhausted over 15 minutes. And now I'm lifting it like 70 times over the 15 minutes. I'm still not getting tired. Maybe I need a heavier weight. Seeing that progression is powerful. It's meaningful. And sometimes it takes a little bit of inspiration. Sometimes it takes that cool set to drive you to that level where you're like, you know what? I want to do these better. I'm going to go figure out how to do this the way that it's shown on the box, or the way that I saw someone else do it. Who knows? And if a dual pack, a really cool, compelling scene from Star Wars that features characters that you really resonate with or really like, has that moment because you're like, man, I'm gonna get this, and I want it to be cool because it's an investment. It's investment in time and resources and everything else. Like they all are, but this one is truly an investment. Then, sometimes that's the push you need. Sometimes you need that mountain to climb. But it's everyone's personal journey, and no one can really tell you how to do it. You just do it the way you want. But personally, I don't think that those opportunities should be locked behind, many hundreds of dollars, high-end resin collector, blah-de-dee, blah, 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 only accessible to people who are really willing to put significant monetary resources into it. We kind of want to open it up. And we do a lot of work to make sure that they're as accessible as possible while still being things that we can reasonably create and produce, because that's important too. Oh, Wild Dallas has arrived. When we talk about design stuff, what is the chat's question about design stuff? Dream dual packs? No, we can't do that here. That would be a future release, sir. Although somebody did bring up your highly desired McClunky dual pack. So people are behind you on the McClunky. McClunky. What, Anne? That's an important moment. The McClunkies.
Oh, for sure.
It's also Dallas's favorite Star Wars quote. He says it enough.
Well, what about how did you decide on the pose for this miniature? Were there any different options or?
Yeah, so every miniature, for the most part, their journey to a pose begins with a kind of a quick discussion about what the character is, who the character is, right? And then Dallas and his art boys go off and they doodle some more, and then all of a sudden they come back with this sheet, this pose concept sheet that has, typically it has at least 6 or 7, but sometimes there can be as many as like 15 different pose options. And some are small variations and some are pretty dramatic departures and stuff. But at the end of the day, right, we get a whole smorgasbord to look at. And from there, we have a discussion about, okay, well, what can't you do in miniature? Because you can draw a lot of things that you just can't do in miniature. So anybody who's like, anything that's leaping through the air or doing some kind of crazy stuff, the immediate question becomes, okay, if we want to do that, how are they attached to the ground? Because we have yet to crack floating miniature technology. So how are you going to attach them? And then the question becomes, if you attach them in that way, does that actually ruin the pose? And then you start talking about, okay, we've identified that these ones don't work, so we'll just toss them out for whatever reason. And then you start thinking about, well, does this pose actually work in miniature? Because there's a lot of poses that you can draw because it's a 2D perspective and you can kind of cheat certain things, or you don't have to worry about how a miniature looks like in 360. That look cool on paper, but just don't hold up in 3 dimensions. Crouching is really hard to do. Having people like hunched over at all is really hard to do because the miniature is already really small, right? It's this big. So when I hunch you over, I lose all of it because you're almost always looking at the miniature like this. You know, it's always like this. When you're playing with the miniature and all that stuff on the table, you're looking down at it. So if you move the critical pieces of information of the miniature, which is typically the face and the chest, right? We as humans are designed to immediately look at the face of something. That's why we see cars that have faces. Our brains are so predisposed to say, okay, let's look at a face, because the face is the most important part, that we see faces where faces aren't. We're really good at seeing faces. So when you move a miniature in a way that you can't see the face, that can be a huge problem. It can really destroy the miniature. So if you're going to do somebody who's crouching, you have to think really hard, okay, well, what does that mean for the pose? How are we going to make sure that you can see the important critical information? So crouching miniatures often have cheats. You know, you do things to them. You either enlarge them. So if you really get the calipers out and start measuring like anatomical proportions, you'll likely notice that most crouching miniatures are ginormous if they stood up. Because these don't move, right, and your eye is reading something that's very small, you cheat it. So you can do that with crouching poses. Then, of course, there's the question of like, okay, where's the face, and are we blocking the face? So with Sauvage, we loved this pose that we kind of came to where he's doing this big old overhand swing, right? Because it feels brutish, it feels strong. He doesn't feel graceful, he feels like a brute, and that's what Sauvage is. So we push in to that idea of being a brute, but now we have to talk about, okay, you know, how do we cheat the shoulder down so you can see the face, so the face doesn't get buried? He's got this big armor pad here. How does that work? You start making these little micro adjustments to the pose. Some of this happens in sculpt, some of it happens when you're drawing it. Sometimes you move elements around to talk about different things. You see his back is cheated up so you can see more of the face. All of this stuff happens. So there's a ton of stuff that goes into it. Yeah, he's not trained. He doesn't get a lot of training. You know, they kind of just throw him into it. So he is just bludgeoning people with his super sharp laser sword. And you want those, like, ideally you want that character to read from the pose. You want, one of our big tests is if I don't tell you who the character is and I just show you the silhouette, right, just the outline of the pose, can you guess with any degree of accuracy who the character is? And if you just saw this guy in shadow, in silhouette, you know, the horns would kind of give it away, the lightsaber might, but you would say, oh, this isn't Maul, this is Sauvage. Because Maul doesn't move like this. Maul's much more graceful. He's much less like brutish, he's more finesse. He's more confident, right? There's more controlled rage to him. Whereas his brother Sauvage is very different. So posing miniatures is it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of debate, and then getting that pose to translate in the end is a lot of incredible work on many people's sides, including the sculptor. The engineering team has a huge amount to do with it. Because once you pick a pose, you're not done. You then have to be like, okay, well, but how are we going to part this thing? And now we're coming back to, we have to preserve some details. So that determines parts, because you can't have undercuts and you can't have these things in certain materials. Just like game design and development, every little thing you do has potential massive impacts and, you know, consequences down the line. So you have to think about all of these things. You'll never catch them all, and once they rear their ugly heads, you have to then figure out, okay, well, how do we maintain the original idea, the original artistic intention, with the minimal changes possible? So what can we shuffle? What can we shift? And every once in a while, you do wind up in a situation where, much to everyone's innate sadness, the thing that you thought would work doesn't work. And at that point, you have to make some really hard choices. And you got to make some engineers really, really sad, because the engineers typically are the ones who have to go back and kind of rebuild the sculpt from the ground up, using the foundation that the sculptor made, but to repose it. And thankfully, that's really rare, but it does happen. And we're lucky enough that we have an incredible team of engineers who are also really talented sculptors. So they're able to go in and fix those things. And in fact, a lot more sculpts these days that you're seeing, if you look at those credit sheets, which you absolutely should, because lots and lots of folks put in a lot of hard work in order to bring about these incredible products and let me waste an hour of my day hanging out and painting instead of doing actual work. No, they do incredible jobs, and without any of them doing the stuff, we wouldn't get to spend this hour together, we wouldn't get to hang out at the game store together, we wouldn't have anything to talk about, because there'd be no Shatterpoint. But a lot of those fine folks are now doing sculpts from the ground up. So not only are they sculpting it, they're also doing the engineering, they're also doing a lot of the sculpting. And it's been really exciting and fun to watch as we've reached a place where, you know, those talents can be explored, and everyone just kind of puts their passion and energy into it to make the best thing possible. Yeah, the rule with lightsabers really is that whatever looks cool is kind of the way it goes. There's a canonical reference for lightsaber length, but when it comes down to it, it's like whatever fits the composition. You can cheat it a little bit. You can't make it like crazy huge, but he uses the spear when he defeats the Jedi and his Padawan in his first quote-unquote test. So he goes with the droids on that one planet, and then after he beats them with the halberd, the glaive, he gets gifted his lightsaber. Gifted, quote-unquote. Okay, let's do a really quick face because we're running out of time. So I'm gonna try some speed paint here. We're just gonna see how this goes. Yeah, the base is just a placeholder. So I just grabbed a base. It turned out to be the wrong base. I stuck them on there. As we discussed earlier, the way that I approach painting miniatures and doing stuff is I batch paint all my bases separately in like one hobby sesh. And then that way when I'm finished with a mini, I just break it off the temp base and I stick it on the real base that I've already finished and painted, and it lets me feel very accomplished. All right, so we're just gonna slap some of this yellow on. So this is just the Army Speed Painter yellow. We're just gonna see how it turns out. We're gonna use this here because I think it's gonna let you read those details that are in there really quick. So for those who are curious about how his facial marking sculpting is, you can kind of see those as they start to read out. Because we'll get that nice contrast. Get his hands. But personally, I wouldn't stop with just the yellow speed paint. I would probably go back and do a little bit more to it because his skin is yellow, but it's not like primary bright yellow. So this is a little too rich for my personal preference on him. I would kind of want to see a bit more of a desaturated ochre, which would really just be going back in and doing some like bone colored highlights and everything, toning down some of that warmth that's there. But this is, I mean, it's not bad. It's not bad. It would do for the tabletop. So that's there. We'll just do some red speed paint, some Fire Giant. Oh, that's Fire Giant orange. I don't want that. Whatever. We'll just do some mixy. So some Inktense red, some Fire Giant orange. This will probably get us close. I don't hate that. That works. Grab some of this medium over here. Thin it out. Bloop. Bloop. Get our blade going. Bloop. Bloop. Bam! Look at that. Instant lightsaber. Guess that's why they call them speed paints. That's right, Ann. I'm hilarious. All right, the last thing I want to do is I want to just do a quick glaze. Let's think about how I want to do this. I'm going to take some Inktense black. So I'm going to use some black ink because I don't honestly know how the Chimera and the speed paint would react together, and it makes me nervous. So instead, we're going to take some Chimera black, we're going to take some black ink, a good amount of water, a little bit of this medium. Now I want to create a really thin glaze. Yeah, look at that. All right, so there we have our really nice glaze. It's flowing pretty well. It's not separating or anything, so I think we've got where we wanted. Now, to be fair, if I was doing this at home, I would use an oil wash. Because Oil washes just give you way more control because you can erase them. So you slather them on and then you pull them off. I need to probably go back to that at some point and do a refresher. I did it a long time ago on stream. But we haven't really done an oil wash in a while, and that makes me sad, honestly. Because oil washing is become my favorite, so my new favorite way to paint for the most part is I will do some airbrush work and lay down my foundational colors. I will go in with an oil wash and I will get all of my shading and kind of build my volumes and everything using the oil wash, because you slather it on, it shades everything, but it also tints everything and you can control where it goes and all of this good stuff. It's amazing, it's fantastic, it's wonderful. You should absolutely do it once I show you how, if you haven't seen it. Or just go on, the YouTubes or whatever. There's so many great tutorials on it. But you oil wash, and then once the oil wash is dry, you just go back in with your normal acrylics again and you do your highlights and you pop, you define the shapes and the volumes and all of that good stuff like you would normally, but it takes way less time because most of the heavy lifting is done by the airbrush and the oil wash. So you just have like the little bit of finishing work to do, which is sometimes the most fun part of the job. And once you're done with that, you've got a gorgeous miniature, and you can once you get pretty proficient at it and kind of get the flow going, you can knock out really great looking results in almost no time. And I personally think it's faster and a better result than just using, I know slap chop's all the rage with the kids, but I don't find slap chopping to be all that enjoyable. I think the results are great, and if you love it and it makes you happy, then by all means keep doing it, because that's the only point. But for me, that whole process of tedious dry brushing color and then using high contrast paints to do one layer and be done, it doesn't. You remember those? No, I'm gonna really show my age. Do you remember those old those books with the magic marker that you used to get as a kid for road trips, which probably no one takes anymore? And they were just like a lemon juice pen, but you rubbed them over the page and then the page just magically colored itself. That's what slap chopping feels like to me. And I remember being as a kid, I was like, this was neat once, and now I'm bored because all I have to do is just mash things over and I'm done. I like the process. To me, painting is enjoyable because of the flow and the way I get to approach it and appreciate it. So slap chopping, not for me. I like the mixed medium. I still want great results, and I don't want to spend, I'm not trying to be a competition painter or anything. I have no interest in putting more than a few hours. My max on a Shatterpoint mini is usually about 3 hours. 3 hours I get really antsy and I'm I'm done. We're done. We're out. Time to move on to the next one. Any less than that and I feel really proud and accomplished. So, I'm looking for that 2 hour mark, which is great for me. And the mixed medium approach, which I've been working on and getting better and better at, and that's really been my huckleberry. And it's very fun, it's very fulfilling, and you get a lot of flexibility and freedom to kind of mess stuff around. All right, well, we still have to do his face, but this is the end of our Sauvage. After 1 hour, he's very glossy right now. Turn off the sound, Anne. Let's wrap it. All right, and there he is all cooked. So we could go back through and add a couple specular highlights, and if we were oh, that glaze was a little too heavy, which it probably was because I was going fast, it got a little darker than I wanted, we go back through and once again, really quickly, this would kind of be the process next. You'd grab a little bit of your highlight and you go, oh, I want a zing here, whoop, and I want a zing here, whoop, and I want a zing here, whoop, and you just start like knocking in the little spots. Maybe you say, well, you know what? I add some little scritches. Scritches are the best. Give your cloth texture, right? So I'm gonna put a little scritch right here. Put some little stretch marks for the fabric, and I'm just gonna scritch in some stuff. And then maybe I want to scritch over here across his leg. So you just go back through and you build all that stuff out. Maybe you go to your brown, because you need to see those little like specular highlights on your brown. And you could even push these further. You get really crazy, come in here and just make them super bright. Just say, we're gonna put one right there, right there, right there. Maybe there's one right there. And you just do whatever you want. Do whatever feels good, whatever looks good, There's no rules. It's your piece of art. Build up those shapes and those volumes any way that feels good. Because one of the things that you want to do too, at this point especially, step back, go grab a drink of water, come back, look at the thing from whatever distance that you are going to play with it. So like in this case, I just ruined Anne's day. Arm's length away, right? It's going to be on the tabletop. Because if you get really close to a lot of studio miniatures and stuff, you'll see that they understand how far the viewer is going to be from the piece. You're not going to be looking at it this close. So all those little scritches that might look terrible because you're like way zoomed in and you're looking at this tiny little 2 centimeter by 2 centimeter square, you're like, oh, this looks terrible. When you step back and you remove your vision and you look at it holistically, you're like, oh my gosh, it looks great. It looks so natural. It looks real. And it's because of where your eyes are zoomed in. So it's just like looking at an old school comic. I'm just talking about how old I am today. That's the deal. It's just literally how ancient are you, dinosaur man?
The term is wizened.
Wizened. How wizened I am. But yeah, the old school comic, with the dots and dot matrices and those kind of things. So like you build colors out of the dots. If you zoom in, it doesn't look like a thing. You zoom out, it looks like the thing. That's it. So yeah, and if you want to know what Savage does, they posted them today. There's an article and everything. You can go check him out. He's quite the monster. He loves murdering primary characters. That's what he does. He's a big old brute, and that's how he works. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me. Be sure to tune in tomorrow, 1 p.m. Pacific. Dallas Kemp's going to be on. He's going to be painting up something cool. I don't actually know what it is. And then, of course, next week, don't miss it. We're going to be playing some games. We've got Star Wars Legion happening on Tuesday, and we've got Marvel Crisis Protocol happening on Wednesday. Until next time, I've been Will. You've been great. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.